Today we're going to talk about how to say warm in winter and cool in summer.
Hey guys, welcome to another Van Tech Tuesday. The episode today is on insulation. Don't forget to like down below if you haven't already, and if you're not part of the family, consider subscribing down below. And if we miss any topics or you'd like us to cover any topics on Van Tech Tuesday, please leave a comment down below. The number one question you need to ask yourself before doing anything to do with insulation is, do I really need insulation?
What are you going to use the van for? Are you going to use it just for the weekends, or are you going to live in the van or travel for a long time?
It's often really easy to get super carried away when realistically you're just going to use a van on the weekend.
Now, if you're going to live in the van or travel for a long time, then yes, we would recommend to insulate it, because you will probably have a better time, especially if you're traveling in hot climates or if it is really, really cold.
So the three main reasons why you insulate is: one, sound. If you've ever parked at a busy truck stop and tried to sleep, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Two, is to try and keep the temperature at a stable and consistent level inside the van. If you've ever slept in a tent, imagine putting a heater in a tent. It does nothing, it just goes straight out into the atmosphere. And number three is obviously keep heat out or cold out. And that's basically what you're doing with creating an insulation system. One thing that's really important to touch on with insulation is it comes down to having a complete system. Just like a bucket full of water, if it's got one leak in it, although the bucket is all waterproof other than where the leak is, everything will just come to the weakest link. So you could insulate a van amazingly, but if you've got one window and it's open, obviously all the noise is going to come in and all the heat's going to go out. Think about things like curtains and windows. That is important.
So if you decide to insulate your van, then the next question is, what materials are you going to use? Well, before talking about any of the options that there are out there, you need to think about R values. So what are the R values? So basically the R stands for resistance. So an R value is the resistance of the material to actually let the heat or the cold weather inside the van.
Let's slow that down a second. Okay, so in layman terms, it's basically you have a material here, it's getting heated up this side by, say, the metal exterior of the van, and the R value is how well heat doesn't transfer to the other side, or it's resistant to the other side. And that's what your R values are. All different materials have different R rating.
Okay, so the first material is the polystyrene. That's your favorite, I think.
Yes, polystyrene. We went with polystyrene as our last defense.
Yes.
Just because we were offered it for free. And it actually has really good waterproof properties. And also it has a pretty good R value, and obviously the money, it didn't cost us anything. Yeah. So we would thoroughly recommend it. You can ask around anywhere that has pallets. They can get these really super thick polystyrene sheets, and they're huge, so you can cut them down, you put them into the shape that you need them.
But yeah, polystyrene is really good R values, really good option. It can also be used with our second material, which is expandable foam, which is also polystyrene, but the difference is it comes in a can. It's kind of easy to use. You can use it to fill in the gaps that you cannot actually reach.
Yeah, so you can just stick the nozzle of a spray can into the gap, spray it, and it fills up the entire cavity.
It has a really high R value, so it's one of the best insulators. Now, what is the con is
it's expensive as. Yes. It was so expensive. That was the most expensive product we spent on our insulation.
So be really careful when you put it in.
Take your time with it.
Don't underestimate it, because it can get huge.
And buy more cans than what you need. The amount of trips that we did to the hardware store
just to get one.
To buy more cans.
Yeah. So the third material is Reflectix or bubble pack. Reflectix actually does that, reflects the heat coming in or the cold coming in into the van. and it's actually not that expensive.
Yeah.
It's easy to cut, to put everywhere. But two of the cons it has is, one of them, when you have Reflectix, you have a card and then you have more Reflectix, you have to use aluminum tape, because from that gap the heat can go in and out.
And also overlap them. So how do I explain it? So you have this here, so overlap.
And then you put the aluminum tape.
Yeah.
There.
Because it is a barrier, or a radiant barrier, you're supposed to put it everywhere and basically make a shell out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing you have to make sure is that you leave a gap of air in between the Reflectix and the van or the other material, because the more air it has, the more air it has, the highest reflection is gonna do.
It's incredibly difficult to do that. We had to make wooden battens, which basically lets the Reflectix hang free so that there's an air bubble. So basically, another material that you often overlook is air, and it doesn't cost any money. But yeah, air is a terrible insulator. So what that means is that if there's something hot here and something cold there, the heat doesn't transfer very well because it doesn't have thermal mass.
Yeah.
So the energy just can't travel through. So in our defense, when you're building a van, it's incredibly important to leave air gaps.
Yeah, so I guess that would be another material, just use the air. So you can put a wall, have the air, and then just have the van. Now, the other material that is out there is fiberglass. We personally didn't find any pros for fiberglass, and everything was a con, like toxic, and it keeps the moisture in, so it absorbs the moisture, and that's the worst thing ever. You don't want moisture in your van.
There is products that are mold resistant, but
they
obviously
would be more expensive, so
yeah, we just didn't want to handle it, to be honest with you. Obviously they use it in houses in Australia everywhere, and it's actually ROCKWOOL as well now. Yeah, but just handling it, and when you go over bumps and you're shaking the van up, we didn't want these fibers
to break and then be in the air. I don't know, it's something toxic. I don't want any of the van.
Maybe we're just being a little bit funny about that, but I mean, other things as well you can use is denim, and it does actually have its plus sides where you can easily squeeze it into a cavity, which obviously, like polystyrene, you can't. You've got to cut it, you've got to be precise, and you've got to put it in.
Yeah.
So that's probably the only con about fiberglass. And maybe as well you might have some friends who have some leftover bats under their house, so it is cheap, but it's toxic. So
and then the last material that is out there is sheep wool. This is actually pretty good insulator, has a high R value. We didn't put in our van, but it's a good option.
It was expensive.
It was a bit expensive, but the other con is that it occupies a lot of space, and space is the most precious thing in a van, and you don't want to have a wall that is this big because it has a lot of sheep wool for insulation. So you don't want to have a smaller house just because of the sheep wool. Which is what
you're supposed to do.
So that's why we didn't choose it, but it's a good option.
Yeah. So to help you guys out, we're going to go through the two main ways of insulating depending on budget and situation. So the number one, and probably the cheapest, is to simply go to a hardware shop, buy Reflectix, and sandwich that in. Try to put an air gap in between your interior walls of your van and the Reflectix, which is attached to your van walls. And that's actually a pretty good solution. It's not really that great for noise, but in terms of creating a thermal barrier to stop the van radiating its heat inside and vice versa, letting the heat out in winter, this is a good option. Things to really consider though, to make it a complete system, is try to cover your windows as well with Reflectix.
Yes. So the second option, and that is what we use in the van, is to use polystyrene, expandable foam, Reflectix, and then have the walls. And actually we've been living in the van for a whole year, winter, summer, it's been great. And you can really tell the difference between the inside temperature and the outside temperature. As you mentioned before at the start of the video, it is really important to manage this as a complete system. So even if you insulate the van, you have to make sure that the windows have Reflectix as well, or something covering them, and you also have blinds or curtains separating the cockpit from the actual van. Now we use blackout blinds, and they're really thick, so besides stopping the sound and the light coming in, they also stop the heat and the cold air
Pretty
coming
well.
in and out.
To help everyone out, we'll leave links to all the products we've been talking about in the description down below. And if you have any questions, please feel free to comment us. We'll reply and answer any questions you have about insulation.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and see you on the next adventure.